Hi Year 12s, this is my third attempt at recording this video, so please wish me luck. The first time, I don't know, I got distracted or I think I stuffed something up, and the second time my computer stuffed up, and so I have had to be resilient in order to record this for the third time. Anyway, so hopefully this video will show you how to plan for an essay topic and ideally just use the same method, whatever the essay topic will be. A lot of things about planning for essays are similar to, even if it's a text response essay. Dot point number one being something that's really similar. You still need to understand and address the topic, and a way to really do that well. I really nearly fell over. The way to do that is to highlight the keywords. So compare how Ransom and the Queen explore what it means to be a leader. You want to highlight this key term because we know that this topic is on leadership. Going to dot point number 3, it says any quotes in the prompt need to be specifically discussed in the essay. So here we've got these two quotes. The first quote is, "He's their leader, but he breaks daily every rule they have been taught to live by." So that is on Achilles. So this topic wants us to explore, okay, so there's this leader. What is he breaking? Why is he doing that? What does that say about leaders and their leadership and what message it sends? And the second one is, that's not the point. What she's doing is extraordinary, and that's on the Queen. So what is it about her that is extraordinary? What is she doing? What is Freya's message in using this quote? So both of them need to be addressed in the essay. So that should help you when you are brainstorming. In the comparative essay, you largely need to explore topics. So by explore, it means the keywords need to be looked at from different angles. So normally you might get, how does Ransom and the Queen explore X theme, or theme on grief or change, or how does change impact leaders? So there's this key idea that the text wants you to explore from all different I've also said here that the topics need to be ultimately resolved. By resolved, it means you need to come up with some sort of an opinion on what each text discusses, on what it means to be a leader and how that is depicted. So for a topic to be resolved, there needs to be a clear statement as to what each text is saying about the theme. Hope that makes sense. So the first thing, after you have highlighted the keywords and phrases and you're understanding, okay, I need to talk about leadership. I need to talk about potentially, the how leaders are affected by certain things, and how they can be resilient in the face of things. So what you want to do next is conduct a brainstorm. What do I know about leadership in the two texts? And about leaders. Hopefully you would have written some notes on some key themes that you can start remembering. And if you're doing a practice piece, feel free to get your notes up, what you have previously written on leadership. Now, I've highlighted some of the things that I think are, something that I want to write about in terms of leadership. And you will notice that a lot of ideas on leadership slot in nicely with other themes as well. So you've got leadership and change, leadership and grief, leadership and public images, leadership and humanity. And so when you are trying to figure out what the hell to write for your essay, having ideas on leadership that tie in with different themes can help you kind of do a paragraph on leadership and change, and then a paragraph on leadership and grief, and then a paragraph on leadership and family, if you think it's relevant. So these are some of the ideas that I thought were interesting. Leaders are worried about their legacy, especially when their dynasty or their family is threatened. Leaders care to uphold traditions of the past. Leaders care about setting a perfect image or setting a perfect example that's meant to be. grief and crisis can be a catalyst for leaders to seek change. And I might even write something like grief and crisis prevent leaders from okay, this is a bad way to say it, but this is my brainstorm. Prevent leaders from leading correctly or the way they're meant to. And I think if I talk about this, I'm going to get to use this quote about how Achilles was not able to adhere to all the conventions of being a leader because he was so tormented by his grief and his anger. So that's where I might be able to use that. A leader's personal values can come into conflict with the needs of the people in times of crisis, and that we know has happened to the Queen. Leaders can find solutions and a sense of fulfillment in seeking common humanity, empathy, and sharing of grief. A leader is someone who authentically imagines new realities and makes decisions with humanity, with empathy from the heart. That was pretty much what Priam did, and then the Queen was kind of forced to show a little bit of empathy. In order to lead, leaders often sacrifice prior identities, and leaders often believe they were ordained by the gods to lead. I might use this and talk about the quote from the Queen about how she was extraordinary because she ended up showing that humanity, even though it was kind of forced and she didn't really see the need for it, but she did it in order to survive. And so being in touch with the needs of the people is how someone survives, and that was seen in the Queen. So I might use this idea and this idea to discuss that quote as well. So now that I've done my brainstorm, I've got a few things that I can potentially talk about. Pretty much now it's about picking the 3 or 4 ideas that you feel most confident writing that number 1 addresses the question. So does it tell us what it means to be a leader? And then B, do you have evidence for it? And so that's what you need to kind of pick. The second thing that you need to kind of think about is how are you going to organize your ideas and your paragraphs in a meaningful way? They need to have some sort of flow. They need to be fluent. They need to kind of tell a story in itself and lead your audience somewhere. I've found this way of looking at how to organize my paragraphs helpful previously. It doesn't necessarily apply to every topic, but it could be helpful. My first paragraph, I can look at like the initial views or the context of the time and how leadership was initially presented in both the texts and how it's similar and different. And so I'm thinking I can use some of these ideas about, in both texts, what it meant to be a leader was to uphold traditions of the past, to set a perfect example, to preserve their legacy. And that's what I can potentially talk about here. I'm just going to copy and paste that. It did something weird. Let me try again. Hopefully this works. It's probably not going to because I'm doing exactly the same thing I did before. Okay. Then another paragraph or a way to write about the key idea is what is an obstacle to being a leader, and what do leaders have to deal with? And this is where potentially I can talk about grief. So leaders do have to deal with grief and crisis and tragedy. And this is where I can talk about it. And this is where I can talk about my Achilles quote, because I want to show that because of his grief and his torment, he actually wasn't able to lead his people. The next thing that I find helpful looking at is the consequences. Okay, so there is an obstacle here, and what is the consequence of that obstacle? And so this is about a crisis. And I guess a consequence is that your personal values can come into conflict with the needs of the people at the time. Or sometimes in the face of obstacles, leaders find a solution. And this is the other idea. So leaders can find a solution and a sense of fulfillment in seeking common humanity, empathy, and the sharing of grief. And a leader's ability to meet the needs of the people at the time ensures their survival. And that's got my quote on the Queen. And I kind of want to say how, although Priam wanted to do this, the Queen shows her empathy, but it's calculating, because she's done it in order to survive and in order to preserve the institution of the royal family, and in order to preserve her popularity. And then the last category that I think is sometimes helpful is, okay, so what was the initial view on leadership? And throughout the story, has the author's message come clear? Like, what is the author's actual message on leadership? Even though initially both authors are concerned with showing how leadership is about upholding tradition. And really, especially in Ransom, Malouf's trying to say a leader is someone who authentically imagines new realities and makes decisions with humanity. And in fact, that's essentially what Frears is saying is important, even though the Queen didn't necessarily believe it. So these are like 4 ways that you can split your paragraphs, and you can have paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and paragraph 4 if you would like, or you just pick the 3 paragraphs that you think you've got the most evidence and the most examples for, and you feel the most confident in writing about. So just to summarize, you are initially highlighting the keywords of the topic, understanding what the topic entails. Here it's on leadership. Then you need to brainstorm everything you know about leadership and select some ideas that you're like, okay, I think this tells us what it means to be a leader. And sometimes it's helpful to look at it in the through the lens of, okay, what was the initial perspective on what it means to be a leader? What were some obstacles to that? What was a consequence of how leaders handled their obstacles? And what is the author's message on what it means to be a leader? And how is that finally showed in the 2 texts? So that is basically how we plan for any sort of essay. Again, practice makes perfect. So it might take you a whole lot of time over the next couple of weeks to be able to plan for essays, but the more plans you do, the more comfortable you will feel, and the more patterns you will notice about how you plan your essay. So maybe you notice, oh yeah, I always do a paragraph on leaders seeking change and transformation, because I really feel like that's what both the authors are saying. And so you'll notice that that paragraph keeps coming up, and even if you kind of emphasize different things every time, keeps repeating itself, so it gets kind of easier and easier. So hopefully that's helpful, and thank you.